Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to talk about the Arctic, but probably not the one you're used to seeing in nature documentaries. We're talking about why this remote, frozen part of the world has suddenly become the central stage for a new kind of great power competition. The plot is definitely thickening, but the ice, it's getting dangerously thin. All right, so let's get right into it. You might think this whole story starts with politics or, military strategy, but it doesn't. It starts with a huge, dramatic physical change to the chessboard itself. Get this, 4 times. That's how much faster the Arctic is warming compared to the rest of our planet. And that single number, it's the inciting incident. It's the event that's changing the entire game. We're not just talking about a climate statistic here. This is a geopolitical catalyst, pure and simple.
And the science behind that number is this really powerful feedback loop. It's called Arctic amplification. Okay, think of it like this. You've got this giant white shield of ice, right? It reflects sunlight back into space, keeping things cool. But as it melts, it reveals the dark ocean water underneath. And what does dark stuff do? It absorbs heat. That absorbed heat then melts more ice, which exposes more dark water. You see where this is going? It's a cycle that just keeps feeding on itself. And that is the engine driving this entire drama.
And look, this instability isn't just happening at sea. On land, the permafrost, the frozen ground that supports pretty much all of Russia's Arctic infrastructure, we're talking pipelines, ports, military bases, is thawing. It's literally turning to mud. So for Moscow, this creates a frantic race against the clock. They've got to get those resources out of the ground before the ground itself just disappears from right underneath them. Okay, so the ice is pulling back, and Russia sees its chance. It's making its big opening move, and it's a grand vision, too. A brand new global shipping superhighway that could totally rewrite the map of global trade as we know it.
And this is the big, ambitious promise they're making for what's called the Northern Sea Route, or the NSR. The pitch is simple, right? It's a shortcut between Asia and Europe that could slash shipping times by like 40%. But the real question is that vision actually becoming a reality?
Well, the numbers tell a very, very different story. So the actual amount of cargo moving through this route, about 3.2 million tons. Now compare that to the Suez Canal. It sees about 1.4 billion tons every year. It's not even in the same ballpark. It's not even playing the same sport.
And this really pulls back the curtain on what the NSR actually is. It's not some global highway for your iPhones and sneakers. Nope. It's basically a private driveway for Russia to ship its own resources, we're talking oil, gas, and coal, out to markets in Asia. So this isn't about global trade. Not really. This is about national economic survival.
So here's the key takeaway. This resource corridor has become Russia's economic lifeline, especially now with all the intense international pressure it's facing. Take the Arctic LNG-2 project. This thing was supposed to be the absolute crown jewel of Russia's energy exports. But then, bam, Western sanctions hit it, and hit it hard. They cut off Russia's access to critical technology and, crucially, to the special ice-breaking tankers you need to ship the gas. This forced Russia to get creative. Let's just say they had to improvise with a pretty high-risk strategy. So let me introduce you to the Arctic Shadow Fleet. We're talking about an estimated 56 tankers, and many of these are old, they're poorly insured, and they're operating completely under the radar. And what are they doing? They're moving sanctioned Russian oil and gas through these absolutely pristine but incredibly treacherous waters. I mean, can you imagine? An accident or a spill from just one of these ships would be an ecological catastrophe of epic proportions. And there's basically zero cleanup infrastructure up there to handle it.
So you have Russia, isolated and pretty desperate for cash and technology. And into this vacuum steps a new, incredibly powerful player. A player who is more than ready to write its own rules for this new game.
Think about it. Russia needs money, it needs technology, and it needs a huge customer for all its resources if it's going to keep this Arctic dream alive. In today's world, where can they go? Well, there's really only one door left in Archon. And that door belongs to China. Beijing has even rebranded the Northern Sea Route, calling it the Polar Silk Road. And for them, this is about way more than just getting cheap resources. This is a strategic move. It's a direct answer to what's known as its Malacca Dilemma, which is basically its huge reliance on shipping lanes that are patrolled by the U.S. Navy. The Arctic, for China, that's a secure backdoor. So what we're seeing emerge here is a classic marriage of necessity. It's pretty simple.
Russia has the geography and the resources, but China has the checkbook and the technology. And some analysts are now warning that by 2030, the Northern Sea Route could pretty much be functioning as a Chinese logistical corridor, just one that happens to be managed by Russian icebreakers. Right. So this growing partnership, this Sino-Russian axis in the Arctic, has finally forced the West to wake up and make a countermove. But here's the problem. They're starting from way behind. You know, for years, the West pretty much saw the Arctic as this peaceful zone for scientific research. But the Pentagon's 2024 strategy, that signals a massive shift. The official language isn't about cooperation anymore. Now it's all about integrated deterrence. So yeah, the US and NATO are awake to the threat now. But, having the strategy on paper is one thing. Having the actual tools to execute it, that's a whole different story.
And this right here, this is the absolute core of the problem for the West. The icebreaker gap is just staggering. Russia has a fleet of over 40 icebreakers. Some of them are even nuclear-powered giants. The US? The US Coast Guard has just two, and they're both getting old. Let's be real clear about this. Without icebreakers, you can't project power in the Arctic. You can't enforce your sovereignty. You can't even run search and rescue missions. It's simple. The US can't really play on this board right now. But in the middle of all these huge geopolitical chess moves, all this talk of great powers, it's really easy to forget one crucial and, frankly, devastating fact. This game is not being played on an empty board. The people who have lived in the Arctic for thousands of years, they're now caught right in the crossfire of this competition. Their home is literally being carved up for pipelines, for ports, and for military bases. For the indigenous peoples of the Russian north, like the Nenets and the Sami, this so-called development is a full-blown existential threat. Their traditional reindeer migration routes are being sliced in two by new pipelines. Their young men are being conscripted to fight in Ukraine at incredibly high rates, hollowing out their communities. And here's the tragic irony for you. Even the global push for green energy is leading to the destruction of their sacred lands to mine for minerals like lithium. So as we wrap this up, here's the thought I want to leave you with. On this melting chessboard, maybe the greatest threat isn't your opponent, but the board itself. While Russia, China, and the West all maneuver for control, the environment, the Arctic itself, remains the most powerful and the most unpredictable player in this entire dangerous game. The great powers can plan all they want for dominance, but it's the ice, or the lack of it, that will ultimately call the shots. The real question isn't just who will win this new Cold War, but what will be left of the board when the game is over.